So we're back
We're back.
from outer space. Just walked in here to find that look upon your face.
Welcome
Here we are.
to Waking Mad.
Waking Mad. We finally came up with a title,
Yes. Waking Mad.
which is great because I love the fact that this is an organic project. And still the Consciousness Project, that's the subtitle, right? But Waking
Yes.
Mad. It's interesting when you get a definition of something and you name something, whilst you enhance it in that regard because you kind of know what you're doing. And we'll get to what Waking Mad means in a minute. But you also constrain what you're doing as well, don't you?
Yeah.
That's the thing about naming anything, defining anything, which, let's face it, that's what we're doing because we're talking, we're using words. You can define something and you enhance the understanding of that, but by so doing, yeah, you do collapse some
Yep. You don't make it as open.
possibilities, openness.
That's right.
So, first and foremost, how you been going lately?
Yep. When I'm working spiritually on myself, you get these periods of high and low, and the low kind of sucks. Yeah, you feel disconnected and you feel like, I don't know, things are a little more tainted in darkness, I guess. But when you hit those highs, every high, every time you come back to it, it gets better and better. So, and there are ways of dealing with these lows. But it's interesting. Notice that that life happens in these waves that go up and down.
I think that's really important to note that life is cyclical. You know, it comes in waves. A great, excellent metaphor is the actual waves of the ocean. You know, you might be swimming out there, you might be surfing or whatever, and you might get dumped.
Yeah.
You know, and the waves come and push you down, and you get tumbled, and I don't know, scrape your body against the sand or even the rocks, God forbid, and then the waves dissipate and you come up for air. You know, it's almost like there's this interjected mercy in the nature of reality whereby energy comes in waves, and thank Christ it comes in waves.
Well, yeah, I like to think of it as, you know how you go out in the sun, but if you stay out in the sun too long, you get burnt. So you need to retreat from the sun.
Or if you don't go out in the sun, you get very sick.
That's
You
right.
get rickets.
And we all know the sun is really
Everyone's
healthy.
bow-legged.
But if you gradually approach the sun, as in every day you go out a little bit more, you can stay out in the sun for longer.
Yeah, get your tan built up.
Yeah, you tan and
Because I've got a bit of a theory that, by the way, and this is a completely side issue, just won't take too much time, that this whole skin cancer thing isn't just about exposure to the sun, even though obviously the sun can damage ultraviolet. Is it ultraviolet B or something like that? It can damage the skin. I actually think that the sunscreen movement has made us very ill prepared because A, you don't build up the natural melanin pigment in your skin to become tanned, which protects you, but also there's this microparticulate in many sunscreen brands which are absorbed into the pores of the skin, which I believe can be carcinogenic.
yeah, well, aren't they made of plastic?
Oh,
Fine
they're
grains
made
of plastic?
all kinds of shit.
Like it's all kind, yeah.
They really are. They depend.
And then you got
Obviously,
chemicals on
good-
top of that, but yeah.
There's lots of chemicals in sunscreen. Some sunscreens are better than others, but you really have to be careful what you buy.
Oh no, so I'm thinking of toothpaste. Sorry, toothpaste. In
You
toothpaste,
put
there's-
toothpaste all over your skin.
no, there's toothpaste and there's fine granules of plastic in
Plastic?
toothpaste. Yeah, plastic. That's why it's so white
Wow.
and sparkly,
Okay.
because plastic is white and sparkly.
We're going to have to do some fact checking after this and we'll get back to you. But yeah, I've just got a bit of a concern that a lot of what we're told is topsy-turvy. We seem to be told the opposite of what's true a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I can't help it. I don't want to be paranoid or cynical. I mean, that's probably more of an energy of fear and, what would you call it, negativity really. So I don't think I am paranoid and cynical. But I do question.
Well,
I
it's
question everything now. I just don't take anything for granted or believe in anything. I like to maintain open-minded skepticism at all times.
it's a bit like you see all these animals around us, and they go through life like really well. You know, from birth, they're able to walk and run and eat and fend for themselves and hide and do all sorts of stuff. You know, and we are probably the most non-dependent, what would you call them? species, race.
Dependent.
Oh, sorry. Yes, dependent. Yes,
As
dependent.
in, like, we require a lot.
As in, yes, we require a lot.
High maintenance.
Yes, very high maintenance.
Yeah.
Like significantly more than any other animal or insect.
And extraordinarily vulnerable accordingly.
And
not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, you name it.
I kind of refuse to believe that we are so inadequate, ill-equipped to deal with natural stuff like sun and food and, you know? Like, why do we need all these...
You can see that old theory. I don't know if you've come across this. I'm sure you have, Jess, but that old theory that the world is older than we think and human civilization is much older than we think. Mm-hmm. And I believe Campbell talks about this a lot. I think it's Alex Campbell, the forbidden archaeology guy. I went to his lecture in Perth about a year ago. And he's an archaeologist basically, but he goes off the Richter scale about what you're supposed to do and supposed to think in orthodoxy, archaeological orthodoxy. And he's discovered these basically traces of cities beneath oceans and things like that, and it shows the world to be much older than we think. For example, human civilization going back at least to 35,000 years, whereas our contemporary orthodox archaeological human civilization history rhetoric that we're given is basically, 5 to 10 if you're lucky, but Egyptian sort of civilization sort of starting around there, and maybe to some degree in places like Syria and Persia and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, some people say it's much older. So the idea is that human civilization comes in waves. Go back to the waves again. I love these integral conversations and the threads that just come up.
Yes.
and like superstring theory, they all come together. But civilization comes in waves. It goes up to a crescendo of advanced civilization and then dumps to like the the classical world dumping into the Dark Ages post Christianity, which we'll talk about a bit later. And now we're back up to coming out of the Dark Ages. I'd say we're just coming out of the Dark Ages. We're not out of the Dark Ages when it comes to our emotional or spiritual understanding at all. Or energetic understanding, but certainly with philosophy and science and technology and those sorts of things, we're coming out of the Dark Ages. So I think that human beings are much older than we think, and if you take that theory back, going back to why we're so vulnerable and why it's so hard for us to fend for ourselves, and why we're so prone to disease and sickness, whereas other animals seem to be so much more, hardy to some degree. Well, there's an idea that maybe we developed the power and the technology of the atom many, many thousands of years ago. And there was an atomic blast at that time, which put a lot of radiation into our atmosphere and made us prone to sickness and dying much younger than our species actually could have lived for. I mean, it makes you wonder why in the biblical texts, the flood of Noah and so on, and I'm not saying I take that as read or anything, but the idea that man would live for 1,000 years, and now we're lucky to live well until 50. Mm-hmm. You're lucky to live well till 50, and medical technology to some degree can drag that on until 80 or 90, but a lot of the time you're rattling because you're taking so many pills. And you're quite ill. Everything hurts. And I'm not so sure if that's really a quality of life that we're interested in. Surely we're interested in health and wellness. But yeah, who knows? Maybe there's some legacy of ancient civilizations that's left some kind of radiation and problems that affect human DNA or human beings in particular. I don't know.
It's an interesting theory.
It's an interesting theory.
There's spots. We know that there are spots on the surface of the Earth that are radioactive, and that recently humans haven't had any, they haven't been responsible for it.
So there's no evidence of why or reason for it being there. There's been no atomic blast or nuclear power station or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think our understanding of energy really needs to get a little bit more broadened, like this understanding of electromagnetic fields. That thing that people talk about, someone just walked over my grave, and you get this shiver and shudder. Yes. I mean, have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about what's going on in your body as to why you're having this complete shudder and all of a sudden get very cold.
Yeah.
I mean, this is taking us towards like the Ghostbusters
Yeah.
idea, and there is such a thing stemming from paranormal psychology and this sort of thing, your ghost catchers. You can actually get a trimeter which tests electromagnetic radiation,
Yep.
micro temperature fluctuations, and I forget the third variable.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in
And you can pick up these like free moving, invisible traces of energy, and they seem to move in patterns, and they explain things like poltergeist phenomena.
yeah.
And I think you get discharges of energy coming from these pattern-based entities, if you will.
Yeah. So in Africa they have, I think it's South Africa. They have all these stones, like stone circles, and they used to call them. They're old herding storage places, like or even houses or buildings. But there's
Like
this one guy.
the sort of framework left over.
Yeah, left over. And this one guy, I really wish I could remember his name.
We'll do fact checking every time and have a little post after.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Filling in the gaps that
We'll fill in the gaps.
Because we can't remember everything. We're not
Yeah.
going to go on Google and bore you, so we'll look at it later.
And anyway, this stone is actually called ringstone, and if you bang it, it rings like a bell.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it rings like a bell. It's amazing stuff. And
It's
this
got a
guy's
lot of iron in it or something. Or metal.
something.
Yeah.
But they're all arranged. They're arranged in these circles and these pathways, and they extend for miles. Like they cover so much of the land in South Africa. It's crazy, and there's no bones. There's no evidence of that lots of people settled here. No cow bones. No nothing deep underneath. There's also these dug-in gold mines.
Because you can always tell when there's been a human civilization, because they leave behind what they call in anthropology kitchen middens.
Yeah.
Kitchen middens. So basically, if you're going to have any kind of civilization, you need fire to get warm and cook food and whatnot. So you always find charcoal, don't you?
Yep.
And then you find shards of pottery or the bones of the animals that have been cooked, or
Tools.
and obviously the bodies of the people who live there, tools, all sorts of things. You can't just get rid of that stuff.
No.
And you'll find it in a substrata of soil. So if you dig around and you can't find anything, it's like they've vanished without a trace.
That's right. And the really interesting thing about these ringstones is that when you look at it from a topical view, it looks like a circuit board. Really interesting. So here you have this ringstone ringing, ding, which rings the other ringstone all around it, shaped in circles, right? Now, when you have a bowl of water and you go ding like this, it ripples, yeah? So here we have this sound rippling, having this ripple effect, and it's going all throughout like South Africa. And he's taking one of these meters, these electromagnetic meters, and he's gone inside the circle and outside the circle. And guess what? It spikes hugely. There's an enormous amount of electromagnetic power in those circles compared to outside. So here we are talking about other
I think
civilizations.
energy technology, I don't know what you'd call it, because I know physics is all about energy and matter, but in terms of how energy can be understood and utilised, I really think that we're not necessarily thinking about it in the best way. I think we need to think laterally. What is sound exactly? How can sound be utilised more effectively? And the same thing with light. And I mean, this is obviously going into physics, but
Yes. Like there's a YouTube guy, this old musician, and he boiled water just using sound.
amazing, isn't it?
Now, and when you understand it, and I do understand quite a bit of it, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
So, you've been well, apart from being a bit down.
Yes, been down. So
That's the cyclicality.
yes, so I had a bit of trouble sleeping, and been very wired.
Because we were, and we talked about this at the start of this project, the consciousness project, we were going to include our own journeys in this, which is probably quite different to a lot of, documentaries or podcasts or whatever. People like to keep themselves out of it. And there's a notion toward privacy, obviously, or privacy. And I like to be private as well, but at the same time, it's good to share the effects of something, because there are felt effects from doing anything you do. That's the cybernetics, second order cybernetics, where you can't do something without being affected by what you do. So as part of this documentary, it's good to document what's happening to us from doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, our dreams, our lives, what's coming along, what we call runners. You know, the idea that the gods send, so to speak, send energy your way, or ideas or information your way, that turn up in the form of people that you meet, children, even animals. You know, a little bird upon your doorstep if you're Bob Marley.
Synchronicities and...
Synchronicity and ideas that come your way, you know, because consciousness and energy create the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Okay, and as we spoke about last time, it's frequency specific. You're tuning into reality like a radio station, and there's different channels, and we've all got different experiences of reality, therefore. So we can't really just assume that there's this generic reality. Oh, come on, wake up to reality. What is that?
I mean, it's like, you know how when you get like an idea and you have no idea where it comes from? Like you haven't even...
Inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration. You haven't been thinking about it, and it just pops in your head and you have this idea. And like, where did that come from? You could say, oh yeah, it came from within, from some subconscious processing, you know, but...
The visible personification of human perfection.
Yeah.
And etc.
It's worth thinking about and not being restricted to, you know, oh, it's just this.
Because in the ancient days, authors appreciated the idea of these beings called the gods, and therefore, you know, ideas came from the gods. So a lot of writers, and obviously artists and musicians, they would attribute their muse, they would attribute their creation, say their written work, to the god that inspired them, and they'd name it after the god, like the Emerald Tablet, written by Master Hermes, otherwise known as Thoth in the Egyptian pantheon. The Romans and the Greeks obviously took the gods. The gods basically came from the Egyptian world and the Greek world, and then ended up in the Roman world as history moved on and dominant cultures moved on and moved around. And you know, if it was a good idea, they'd be borrowed and recycled into the next culture. But yeah, the Emerald Tablet is a work of genius about the god Hermes, otherwise known as Thoth, and it was written by someone. I believe there are a couple of texts, Asclepius and Stabaeus are the authors, I believe, and but they attribute the work to Hermes, because that was the god inspiration. So, and I actually heard, I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert on a TED Talk, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love? Yeah, Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah, because she goes to Italy and then I don't know, she goes somewhere to meditate in India, and then she goes to Bali where she falls in love. So Eat, Pray, Love. But yeah, so she's a tremendous author, and she was talking about the pressure on the artist, whether they be a musician or a playwright, singer-songwriter, author, of, you know, taking responsibility for all their work, that is coming from myself, me. First, it begs the question, what is me? What is I? And second, it inflates this thing called the ego.
Yep.
So Elizabeth Gilbert was talking about the idea that there is this thing called the genie, which is, you know, where the word genius comes from. We all know about the genie in the bottle, a very powerful mythical being that can grant 3 wishes or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, what if it's the case that genius is inspired by the spirit of genie, or the spirit of something that's much greater than whatever we think we are in this particular incarnation or corporeal world. And if you can let go of the ownership of the work that you're doing to the inspiration of the gods, for example, then all of a sudden, oh, thank God for that. You mean I don't have to take full responsibility for all of this, and I can just let it go, and it's just channeling through me? Oh, that's much better.
It's not
as opposed to the narcissism that you often get, and the egotism and the drug and alcohol abuse, therefore,
disconnection
that you get in many artists.
When you focus on the ego, you create disconnection.
Yeah, when you take ownership of it, it's mine, it's me, I did this. I start to become grasping, and I own it, and it's egotism, and it's narcissism, and it's this ballooning bubble of a veneer of self, superficial, materialist, grasping I-ness, and it disconnects us from the whole universe. And let's face it, that actually, paradoxically, is the major cause of suffering, a sense of disconnection and isolation and separation. So
but really,
why do it?
Like you can't say that anything is yours, truly. Even the body that you have was made by your mother and father, right? That's not even your body. And the collection of memories and experiences you have, you could say,
I'm borrowing
these are my experiences and only mine. Yeah, but who gave you those experiences? You know, see, we're all in this together, like this web, yeah. And we're neither separate. No, wait, we can't be separate. We're all together. That's the only way you can look at it. So when you start saying, "Oh, it's mine," or "It was my idea," you are forcing yourself to be separate from the natural flow or the natural order of things.
Yeah, and you get fixations and obsessions.
Yeah,
don't you?
Addiction.
It's like possession. You know, true love is non-possession, non-possessive.
Yep.
If you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, it loves you too, basically, right?
Yeah.
And it's that freedom of letting people be who they really are and not trying to control them and own them, which is that horrible legacy we have of patriarchy, where men would give away the bride, you know, basically frog march her down the aisle in a burqa, you know, the veil, and then give her away to another man with payment with a dowry and all this sort of stuff, and women were a chattel, and they weren't, you know, having their own independence or even ownership of their body, really. They couldn't own property or whatever. So it's a horrible legacy of ownership and possessiveness, and true love is non-possessive. I mean, the Apostle St. Paul stated this, and many other wonderful thinkers have talked about true love being non-possessive. If you love something, let it go. And that pressure's gone, as opposed to domestic violence founded on power and control, creates
ego,
horrific abusive fear.
And that's it. Fear is huge. Fear, with so much fear, like that's the reason why you want to control things, is because you don't want it to go away. You don't want it to hurt you, you know. And that's fear based, you know. And
so back to ownership. You know, do we own our bodies? Do we own anything? It's a very interesting concept. There's another concept which I'll draw upon, which is that we are consciousness being channeled into this physical form, almost as if you may have a chimpanzee, you know, that's had a bit of genetic engineering, and not to argue that chimpanzees don't have consciousness, but what if it's the case that a basic consciousness is displaced by a higher order consciousness, your Homo sapiens sapiens, as we say, as we define it, and that consciousness is being channeled through this physical form.
That's right. It's like
borrowing that body.
Yeah, yeah.
Incarnating, which means in flesh, as we discussed last time, in meat, incarnate, you know, carnivorous. We are in the flesh at the moment until this body withers and dies.
Yep.
And then we leave it.
Yep.
The idea that consciousness, just like energy, cannot be created nor destroyed, it just changes form.
Yep. Shifts, changes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, what if it's the case that we don't own or possess anything? I love the Aboriginal people of Australia, their version of this. I don't know if they all believe this, because just like the American Indians, that there are, you know, many nations exist in this continent of Australia, and many different dialects and languages and customs and you know, there's many different people. You can't just say it's one tribe. There's many different tribes. But as far as I'm aware, the Aboriginal people didn't naturally think about owning land. That was a concept that was very foreign and unfamiliar and strange to them when European man that is, came here from England primarily in the late 1700s. They couldn't understand how or why you would own land.
Yep.
Because the land owns you.
Yep.
And the Aboriginal warrior or tribesman or tribeswoman is therefore a custodian of the land. You look after the land because the land then looks after you. But you can't own it.
Nope.
And then they have the Dreamtime idea that there's the spirit of the land, the spirit of the mountain, the spirit of the water, and so on. And they have a very enriched Dreamtime understanding of the spiritual background of the land. And they tune into the land, and they've got their ancestral spirits, as all indigenous cultures really do, that sort of animism and so and they would interact and work with in like a harmonious symbiosis or something like that. And you wouldn't go to certain places because there were bad spirits there, and you would have to do things in a certain way to show respect, but you don't own it.
Yeah.
And let's face it, as soon as you think you own something, do you take care of it or do you exploit it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I know that when you have that ownership, there can be a complacence, can't there?
Well, they can. I mean, even though you
Like
think
I've conquered it or something.
even though you think you've taken care of it, like, it's not really yours to take care of. It's just, I mean, like, okay, how do you know that you're doing a good thing? If you're taking control and taking care of it. Well, yeah, I know that, like, you have parents and the children or whatnot, but if it's something that was forced, as in you took it, like, are you really saying that this was natural, this is like a natural gift, or are you doing it for egotistical reasons?
I think it's quite subtle as well. Are you taking something, or are you partaking in something? Are you sharing something? Are you giving back to something? Are you distributing it? Are you hoarding it and exploiting it and holding it and trapping it? Whether we're talking about a loving, well, a pseudo-love relationship of possessiveness, or you're talking about like controlling your children where they can't individuate to become their own individuals and go their own way and be free, or you're trying to stop the river by damming it up. I mean, I'm not anti-progress or anything, but you can just see how downriver they're all screwed basically, aren't they? Because there's no more water coming down there.
That's right.
So it's that whole sort of blockage, stopping, owning. Yeah, maybe it's the idea that we need to be more grateful and accept what we have as a gift and something we have to look after and take care of.
Well, this is a gift. Did you know the Aboriginals, as I was speaking about them, the English used to, there was a story about they took this Aboriginal out to sea and they could identify when their land starts and ends. So they would take them out to sea and he would go, we stop here, we can't go any further because this is no longer my land.
As in the coastal part of it?
As in, like, they would go out to water, into the water, so lots of ocean, and they knew at the point, the exact point, because they repeated this over and over again, every single time, even blindfolded, he knew exactly where it was. That's pretty crazy. Pretty trippy. And they were just gobsmacked.
But look, I wanted to talk about energy even more so, because one of the things, like you've talked about, cyclical mood.
Yes.
And I have also been noticing my cyclical mood, and lately I've come onto a real high patch. And you can talk about circadian rhythm and that kind of bio flow that comes.
Hormones.
Yeah, like we have night and day.
Night and day.
You have the menstrual cycle for women, which you have the lunar cycle.
Yeah.
And obviously the seasons. And I've been noticing my stuff going on here, and what tends to make me, as in subtle or gross, what tends to lift my spirits, what tends to sort of deflate me. One of the things I've been really trying to do, though, is to not get too caught up in it, and just to accept that you have flow, you have highs and lows, you have ups and downs. I think if we overly react to it, especially like with you, you've been having this epiphany lately of consciousness and the idea of a sense of a much greater consciousness, haven't you?
Yes.
I think you can feel in touch with that, like a divine energy, and feel wonderful, and then you can move away from that and you feel like you're in a cave, you're in a shadow, you're in coldness and darkness.
Yeah, it's my down.
Yeah, and I mean it's a bit bipolar, really.
Yeah.
And obviously we'll explore that more.
It's mad.
In a minute. Madness. It's waking mad. But I think it's only particularly bad if you care too much about it, if you react to it, because in a sense, aren't you being possessive?
That's right. You're trying to take control.
Of the divine energy.
Yeah.
Of the sense of the high.
That's not yours.
And that's what makes us wreck it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Whereas if you welcome it, like Rumi's poem, The Guest House,
yep. All
are welcome here, highs and lows, comes and goes, and I did the best I can just to keep things, clear and clean. Do my best. I show up in my life, but the flow and the cycle outside of that, I just have to go with that flow.
Or taking it for granted. That's another big one. Not respecting or appreciating it.
That's right. Yeah, and that's just as we shouldn't get caught up on reacting. Oh no, I'm in a low. You know, I'm in a low. So what? I'll just I don't know, watch TV and eat corn chips for today.
That sounds fun.
You know?
Get grounded, yeah.
Yeah, or I'm going to go out and just do something a bit hedonistic, or.
And that's the best thing about it. It's not to worry about it. It's just to let it flow and enjoy the process. You know.
And also, like you said, be grateful for when it is there.
Yeah.
Be ultra welcoming of it. And I think that one of the ways that we can help with this process is ritual. Ritual helps to demarcate special events and occasions, and it also helps to be grateful and to acknowledge, and to really date stamp something to make it particularly significant. You know, we have birthdays and baptisms and bar mitzvahs and
but they don't
weddings
really mean anything.
Oh, they do. No, I don't agree with you. I think they mean a hell of a lot. And I think that what can make them more meaningful, though, particularly meaningful, is the way that you do them. You know, it's the intention behind what you're doing and how you do it. And that's what makes it particularly meaningful.
Yes, yeah. It's true.
So with, ritual, I think what is happening here is we're using our intention and we're putting it into something, from our minds, if you will, which is very subtle and very, energetic and non-physical. And we're putting it into what we would call the real corporeal world by way of analogy.
Yeah.
So, a magical ritual is like a bell, book and candle for your proverbial Catholic priest who's cleansing a house from a haunting or negative energy or the devil or whatever. Prayer book, bell, book and candle. And he's using prayers and whatnot, incantations, evocations, to cleanse that room, calling upon a higher power. Or your magician, your ceremonial magician from the Kabbalah and whatnot, your Jewish esoteric school, mystery school, using your altar and having your representations of the five elements, your candle and your feather or your air dagger and your special stones and various other things. They all represent different kinds of energy. So I think that we can protect our cyclical moods or energies from negative energy, so to speak, by using ritual. And I've been experimenting a lot with cleansing rituals. I think they're particularly interesting. And I've been trying to integrate different cultures, the shamanic rituals, as well as the Kabbalistic rituals, and also things from Taoism and things like, from Reiki, Japanese, Chinese, European, Jewish, indigenous fusion. It's a bit schizophrenic, isn't it? But I find it so profound. And we were doing one just before we started this podcast today, this recording today, a cleansing ritual. And, I just used my drum, my shaman drum, which I'll show you another time. And I made that drum myself out of deer skin with my good friend John Wife, who lives up in Gidgeganup. And I went into his teepee and spent the whole day making this sacred drum. And I made
jealous.
You can come along and make your own drum, don't worry. And my wife Kim came with me as well, and we made these wonderful drums, and also the what do you call them, the mallets, like the sticks that come with them, stuffed with rabbit fur, and wonderful patterns that we use out of coloured waxed sinew on the back. And this resonance that comes out of this drum, you can just tell it cleanses blockages in your body because the vibration goes through your body. And you can do what we call a drumming down to cleanse someone, but also in the room around you. And if you use smouldering dried sage, especially white sage, which we also did today, that cleanses the energy of the room as well. Now, I don't know exactly why or how, but you think about all the incense that's used across different cultures and religions. The Catholics use incense in their censers, and they have those big swinging censers that fly from one end of the church or the cathedral to the other, spreading that smoke. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard rumours that it was to mask the detritus and filthy smell of the people of the Middle and Dark Ages, but I think that it's more than that. Mm. And obviously in Buddhism and Hinduism, they've always used incense and you know, obviously the Native Americans, they use special herbs, and that smouldering smokiness tends to cleanse. It does get into everything, doesn't it, smoke?
It does.
You can smell smoke on your clothes many moons later.
I know the Aboriginals used to use smoking ceremonies. Whenever they had ill feelings between each other, they'd put these two people or more through the fire with the smoke, and that would dissolve any ill intention. So,
And I think the intention behind it, that this will do this when I do this, that's analogy. You know, I have the intention that this will cleanse. And it's more than that. You know, you'll find that if I burn this particular herb, it works in this way, and this other herb works better in a different way.
it's like chemistry.
So there's something going on there about the product itself, or the ritual components themselves.
It's like chemistry, but on electromagnetic level.
Alchemy.
It's alchemy, yeah, on a different medium.
Which has been dismissed in many ways by contemporary thinking, but I'm actually going back and revisiting it and thinking, what's going on here? And I did the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the LBRP, which comes from the Kabbalah, the Jewish Hebrew magic, if you will, which is that consciousness and energy affecting the nature of reality via a ritual. And it's all about cleansing the room, the altar, the house, the body, everyone in it from negative energy. And, you know, and so I did that, the LBRP, I did the drumming, the saging, and we used a Tibetan singing bowl as well, which is a higher pitched note, and you run the wooden mallet around the bowl, and we'll show you this another time if you haven't seen it already. But we did it all, and the intention as well, visualizing, resonating the names, like the names of the God names, and you know, understanding the nature of the ritual as well, and what the words mean, the Hebrew words and so on, or the Latin words as the case may be.
This is where intention and will comes in.
Yeah, it empowers the ritual with that intention, that will, and that deeper understanding of what this means.
If you had no intention, like if you just did it, it wouldn't mean anything.
I mean, you're bringing. I mean, like I was reading this in Manly P. Hall's work on gnosis, which is a book called The Wisdom of the Knowing Ones, and you know, it's all about gnosis. Gnosis, Gnosis, means knowing, basically, as opposed to agnostic. You know, some people define themselves as I'm agnostic. It means I'm a fence sitter and I don't know. I'm not committed. Whereas the theist, the one who's religious, has the faith, and they say that they know God exists, or they believe in God, or whatever religion they have. And the atheist says it's all rubbish. But the atheist, when you think about it, is just as dogmatic as the theist. Because the atheist is saying, I know God doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Do you? Or are you open-minded, or are you being dogmatic? And the agnostic was thought to be the third option, where you go, I'm not so sure, I'm going to sit on the fence just in case God judges me and he does exist and I don't want to go to hell. Or I'm open-minded maybe. But I think there's another way, gnosis. And it's the idea of, well, let's use philosophy. Let's use science. Let's use our minds and develop the metaphysics of our minds.
Our feelings.
Yeah, to see where we can go with our evolution. The technology of our minds, not just in terms of the technology of hardware and things outside, but the technology of the mind, the metaphysics within. What can we do with our intention, and so on and so forth.
And that's what I meant before. You know, I said like Christmas and birthdays, and I said they don't mean anything. That's because generally, I'm generalizing here, that there's no intention behind it when people perform these ceremonies. You know, the birthday, it's another birthday, do we have to? Oh, Christmas again, do we have to?
I've got to buy a present now.
I've got to buy my present now.
I'm broke.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean it because there's no intention.
Well, that's that materialisation, that commercialisation.
But if you
ceremonies like Christmas and Valentine's and Halloween and whatever, it's just become this commercialised.
That's it. It's kind of
nonsense.
Corrupted the true nature of those ceremonies.
Intention of
the true intention, which is quite beautiful. They are all quite beautiful.
And I think stripping things back to that beauty is, well, it's definitely a recipe for happiness.
Yeah.
That reconnection with what's going on, because so many people are lost.
You
know, dazed and confused about what's going on. We've lost our culture, and that's why I'm going back and integrating, like I was talking about with that ritual, all these different elements, and just seeing what happens, basically. Because it occurred to me, as per the nature of consciousness, and I'll open up on this level now, that some people, aren't just themselves at all times. And I'm not quite talking about multiple personality disorder, but maybe it eclipses that particular pathological definition. In fact, it probably does. But I'm talking about the idea that consciousness is animating this corporeal world, like I was talking about before, channeling. But maybe we can channel different kinds of consciousness. I mean, you've heard of your transconfiguration spirit mediums who channel entities and ghosts, and we talked about Elvis last time. Can you tell me how is Elvis doing, to the channeler, the medium? But I'm actually thinking, what makes a medium different to a non-medium? And I've noticed that sometimes I have moods, like you talked about being down lately. To what extent is it not just cyclical and circadian biorhythm? To what extent is it because we've actually been contaminated by something? Or it's like a mosquito. When they bite you, they leave this horrible itchy lump, and they can even spread disease like malaria and Ross River fever and dengue fever. It's quite a good metaphor, really, Jesse. Because I think that maybe we can get spiritually polluted when an inorganic being, so to speak, consciousness unit, we come along them or come across them or they come across us, and they somehow fixate or cling on to us. I mean, this is presuming the idea that there are free-floating, hypostases or entities or ghosts or demons or nature spirits or whatever out there. And let's just entertain that. I mean, if you're a positivistic, reductionist, materialist scientist, you're going to say rubbish. Well, hang on. We don't know it's rubbish. That's dogmatic. Let's just entertain the idea.
I've already talked about how limited our perception of reality is, because we only see that much of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah, like a dog can hear a whistle that we can't hear, and infrared vision, and for some animals, and like a bat can have sonar and all these sorts of things we can't have. I mean, this is outside of our perceptual range.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's the idea of dimensional frequency as well, on some kind of gauge or level where we can actually change the nature of our reality.
So just because we can't perceive it doesn't mean that it's not there. Yeah. So if we stay in the question and we entertain, we can come up with some interesting theories. Staying
in the question. And we're not going to constrain this project, this consciousness project, because we're not going to say, this is what consciousness is. Because that's the height of ignorance and arrogance. And it's going to constrain us in our project. So we're going to be open here. So I was entertaining the idea that, maybe when I was coming home from the clinic, when I'd seen I might have seen 7 patients that day as a psychotherapist, maybe somehow something was rubbing off on me. Maybe I was coming home moody or sad or even angry at times, because maybe I was picking up some kind of energy. Now, in that same week or two, I had what we call runners, and it's the concept, as per synchronicity, that the gods, so to speak, or the universe sends you a messenger. And I had 4 or 5 patients that week or two, tell me that there was dark energy in my office. That they were like natural psychics, and they could see this shadow around me. Someone said that there was someone sitting, that they saw some spirit or ghost sitting on the chair over there, and they wouldn't sit there. And another person said that I snapped at her, which is very uncharacteristic of me, like something had come over me. And I was like, really? I didn't even remember that. And so on and so forth. And so I really stepped up the cleansing. So when I came home, I would imagine, ultraviolet white light, which is supposed to be a very cleansing, healing colour, coming through my body when I was having a hot shower from the water sort of thing, and all this dark, smoky grey sludge, going through the drain, just cleansing my body, and also various kinds of rituals like I discussed earlier, sage and drumming and these sorts of things, which happened synchronously because we went along to a drum making workshop in the hills, and also like this idea of various symbols that you can draw, like the Mayunamar, and then you can put this into the atmosphere or into the energy body, the aura, if you will, to protect you and cleanse you. So I started doing all these things, and I think it started to have a really good result, because I was feeling happier, I was feeling cleansed, I was feeling less overshadowed, I think would be the appropriate term.
Well, it's a bit like taking a shower. I've used this analogy before we started. And we do this ritualistically. You know, when we get dirty, we get clean. When we put on clean clothes. Now, just because when we look at electromagnetics, there's this like electromagnetic field around us all the time.
And you can actually feel it. You can actually feel this. Like you can do an exercise like this where you can meditate and so on, and close your eyes even, and someone can bring their hand closer to yours or away from yours, and you can actually feel it. You can experiment with that. Sorry, continue.
And so, as we know of patterns, the undulation, and we've talked about many things, many different ways that things can, cyclical, like we have day-night cycles, we can get burnt by the sun, so we need to retreat, all this sort of stuff. Patterns repeat themselves for a reason, okay? And it's not just in one area, it's in like lots of areas, yeah? So you know that this pattern, when it repeats itself, is truth. It's like a mathematical algorithm for running existence. It keeps it running. And so we get dirty, and our clothes get smelly and dirty, and if we don't do a cleanse, an aura cleanse or electromagnetic cleanse, you start smelling, and you're festering.
You're more prone to disease, skin infections.
Yeah. So similar
as opposed to hygiene.
Yeah. So it's not so far-fetched to think that we need to keep our electromagnetic, spiritual, or ethereal, or aura clean in the same way that we keep our corporeal flesh clean and our clothes.
It just makes sense, doesn't it?
It just makes sense.
As above, so below, as within, so without. That's the old pagan saying.
Yep.
And I think that this cleansing stuff, I just wasn't doing. I was allowing myself to get really materialist and superficial, and I was just neglecting the idea of the spiritual world. I didn't even like using the term spiritual. It made me. I felt it sounded flaky. What does that mean? And I was trying to be philosophical, but I wasn't really. I was dismissing it, and as a result, started to get sick.
And restricting.
Yeah, and sickness as well. Sickness, I think, can happen as a result of this stuff. So I've noticed that with the cleansing, the energy's been a lot more cleaner, less compulsive, impulsive, obsessive. Like I think when you're overshadowed, when you get seemingly foreign ideas just pop into your mind, or it really be intrusive in your mind, and you're like, what am I thinking here? What am I feeling this? I'm not even into that, horny shit, whatever it is. I don't want to go out and have KFC right now. I don't want that. Or I don't want to, drink a whole lot of bourbon. What's going on with that? And when you just stop to think, is this of me? Just question. Is this coming from me? Is this what I really am? Do the cleansing ritual. Clear your mind, do some meditation, and if it's still there, well, maybe it is. If it's not there, where did it go? Where was it from? And is it what you really want to do? I think the cleansing gives you that capacity to at least choose without being so harassed.
And that's when you start getting in touch. We're sort of talking about the subtlety before. You can really identify what is you or what's not you, or what is even the ego you. And then there's like the true you, which is like the subtle you, which you can connect more with.
Yeah, the ego is. It seems to be the inner saboteur. It stops one from becoming your true potential. It seems to want to possess you and like have ownership of all the things that you do and have, like we were saying before, and be really competitive and I mean, I'm not like saying the ego is a bad thing, but it can certainly cut you off from the greater reality.
Well, there's a beautiful analogy, the elephant rider, and as the elephant is big and he can move stuff, he's strong and warm, and there's the boy who can't lift stuff and do stuff, but the elephant by himself doesn't know where water is, doesn't plan for food and future trips, but the boy can. But if they work in tandem, this is the ego and the mind. The team.
Yeah.
They team up together, they can achieve a lot.
A symbiosis. And the pattern repeats itself when you look at symbiosis in animals and insects. Yeah, like the
bacteria.
The bacteria that we require to help us digest food, and that's
Exactly.
why you should take probiotics if you have had antibiotics because of an infection, because it kills everything in antibiotics.
Or even just disinfectants and those household chemicals that can be hugely dangerous.
That's right. And the idea that consciousness being, ephemeral, eternal, and obviously non-physical, whereas the body being corporeal, and that there's a symbiosis between consciousness and body.
That's right.
Or symbiosis between, you know, anything really. There's many relationships. Everything's relational, really, isn't it?
It's all relational.
What exists in isolation? How would it be defined in isolation?
This is where we're talking about self and non-self. You know, how we can't really say that nothing is truly ours, because even our body's not ours. And that all ideas are shared or come from somewhere else or someone else. You know, so we can't be isolated. It is relational.
And as per the idea of things being relational, I was reading about Gnosis recently, and the Gnostics were the ancient people around the, you know, 1st century AD or 1st century BC or whatever, but mostly AD, because what they did is they tried to bridge the gap between the paganism of the ancient world and the new Christian cult at that time, or sect, which had come and started to take over. And the pagans and the Christians lived sort of, you know, parallel lives. You had the ancient library at Alexandria, and you had obviously the ancient Greeks, and the Romans were pagan, and many other peoples were pagan. They had pantheon of gods and so on and so forth. And they actually had a hell of a lot of scientific technology. You think about Pythagoras, he was a pagan. You think about Plato, he was a pagan. Socrates, a pagan. And many artists and engineers and writers and scientists and astronomers were pagan. So they had this flourishing of knowledge in the classical world. And then the Christians came along, the early Christians, and they wanted to make everything the same and get rid of paganism. They looked upon it as an enemy to the church. I believe Catholic means universal. So they wanted to be the universal truth.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know about the witch trials and all sorts of stuff, and the burning people at the stake, and the murder of Hypatia, the pagan librarian at Alexandria. There was this major library at Alexandria, one of the most beautiful, wonderful libraries of the ancient world.
It lost so much.
All destroyed. The Archbishop Cecil demanded that Hypatia destroy all the scrolls. She would not, so they killed her. And how did they kill her? In the most cruel and vile way possible. They flayed her skin with scallop shells and then burnt her alive at the stake. Why not? Because that's very Christian, isn't it? Now, you might think I'm against Christians. I'm certainly not. No. I'm against evil. I'm against violence. I mean, I'm not against it, but I mean, I think that, you know, it's not good to hurt people. So, you know, you can see how the Gnostics were the reaction to that dichotomy of paganism and Christianity. They tried to integrate them together. You had people like Marcion and so on, who were Gnostics, and they tried to bring the pagan and the Christian worlds together. So you've heard of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, which is a very Christian or Catholic way of understanding the Godhead, the tripartite definition.
Triangle.
Well, the Gnostics had talked about, you know, the will, the wisdom, and the action. So the Father principle is the will. The Son principle is represented by the Sota, or philosopher sage, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, is the wisdom, the philosopher, okay? And then you have the action, which is the Holy Ghost, which is that permeation of the outcome of the will via the philosopher's wisdom to create something in the world.
The ripple.
The ripple. So what we need to do, and this is as per our consciousness project as we near the end of this particular recording, is refine ourselves, whether it be through cleansing or through learning. Meditation, and obviously things like, you know, who you associate with. You need to be careful what you do, what you don't do.
Observing. Nutrition,
diet, lifestyle, exercise, you know, drug and alcohol, and all sorts of things that we can do.
Experimenting. You know, like what happens if you don't eat, don't drink? What happens? And just observe what happens.
And so we refine ourselves, the will, the wisdom, the action, as the Sota priest, the philosopher in the middle. Bearing in mind, philosophy comes from two Greek words, philos and Sophia. Sophia being the goddess of wisdom, of knowledge, and philos meaning love. So we are showing, as they believed in channeling and everything was attributed to the gods, a philosopher is attributing his love to the goddess Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. And so we have to be philosophers in that spirit, and then we connect. We bridge the gap between the various worlds,
Yeah.
and in this case we bridge the gap between the will principle
Yeah.
and the action, the outcome principle. And we have to refine ourselves. You can't remove yourself. You're connected to that process. Indeed, you are the bridge.
You are.
You are the bridge, bridging that gap, and you're important as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, human beings have made themselves or been led to believe that they're not important.
They're so important.
I mean, of course,
so
you're the
important.
cutting edge of evolution. You know, you are very important. I've heard people say that we're like a cancer on the globe. What bollocks! Utter bloody rubbish nonsense. That is a negative reductionism against humanity,
Yeah.
and it seems to be Malthusianist, that population reductionist model, to make people feel so bad about themselves that they kill themselves, or we stop breeding, or we, destroy civilization. The green fascism, the idea that we're destroying the world.
But yes, we are capable of so much destruction and darkness, but we are capable of so much love and light.
If we evolve.
Creation.
If we evolve.
Yes.
One of the reasons that we're so destructive of the planet as a collective species is because we're still burning fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we could have had electric hydrogen cars years and years and years ago, and it's all been obfuscated and suppressed.
Yeah.
And that's not my fault, or this guy's fault, or your fault. That's some kind of power cable, probably involving the fossil fuels, energy production, multinational corporatism.
Mm-hmm.
That's not you or I. So don't blame us for, reaping and pillaging the goods of this earth, over consuming, when we are being kept down by the weighty hand of the powerful cable of whoever those are that are in control. If we were left to our own devices to be philosophers and scientists, and not just someone in an ivory tower in some lab owned by Exxon, but all of us, get out of the magazines and worshipping celebrity culture and eating junk shit food, and get into yourself, show up in your life and become a philosopher. Worship, if you're going to worship anything, worship knowledge and wisdom, and apply it in your life. Be the bridge between the potential and the actual.
And knowledge and wisdom can come from everywhere, all sources, even children.
You can have
animals.
runners come your way, and be the change you want to see in the world. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Show up in your life.
Change yourself.
And this is your life
Change the
quest.
world.
This is your quest. This is the reason why life is important.
Yes.
And it may kill you. In fact, it will kill you in the end. This is your quest. This is why you're here. You're here to make sense of what the hell this amazing thing is called life, and to obviously cleanse yourself of whatever detritus, we call it karma, that you may be carrying. And we might need to talk about that another time.
Stop being in fear.
It's a quest.
Stop being in fear. Life is greater than me or you, or it's everyone. It's relational. We're all in this together. So let's wake everybody up.
Yeah, and we're going to
Let's
start by
work
waking
together.
ourselves up, right?
That's
Be
right.
the change you want to see in the world.
That's right. That's where you start. And
Thank you for
Thank
this opportunity.
thank you.
So this is Waking Mad,
Making mad.
and it's got a lovely play on it. Hey, it's a bit like Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Waking Mad, the Consciousness Project.
Consciousness project.
So here we are. We've shown up. Hope you like it.